Imagine you're holding a freshly picked apple in one hand and a crisp, newly printed dollar bill in the other.
Okay, quite the contrast.
Right. If you really think about it, only one of those things has inherent biological value. I mean, the apple provides calories. It can literally keep you alive.
In the dollar bill.
The dollar bill is essentially, a shared hallucination. It's a piece of paper or, let's be real, a digital zero on a screen that only has value because we all collectively agree to pretend it does.
Yeah, the apple is a physical reality, whereas the dollar is just a social contract.
Exactly. And usually that dollar only exists in the first place because someone, somewhere, went into debt.
Which is really the crux of the issue.
Yeah.
Because what is becoming increasingly clear to, well, a lot of macroeconomists and technologists, is that this specific social contract where money basically equals debt is starting to buckle under its own weight.
Yeah, it really is.
We live in a system where the very creation of our money is inextricably linked to the expansion of financial obligations.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a stack of sources today that propose a radical, completely decentralized blueprint for what the author calls a post-dollar economy.
It's a pretty fascinating stack of documents, too.
Oh, totally. We've got this extensive dialogue and a formal white paper drafting a concept called the Second Value Protocol by Martin Moravchik. Okay, let's unpack this, because this deep dive tackles a massive foundational question for you. What if money wasn't based on debt, but on actual physical reality?
Right.
Like, what if we bypassed banks entirely and literally minted money out of the dirt, the water, and the sun?
It's a profound thought experiment. And, to understand why this matters to you, the listener, we really have to establish how our current monetary system actually operates behind the curtain.
The mechanics of it all.
Exactly. Right now, central banks create base money, and then commercial banks, they multiply it by issuing loans. So almost every dollar circulating in your pocket or your bank account represents a debt owed to a financial institution.
Which the sources refer to as a debt trap.
Yes, the debt trap. Because this architecture inevitably creates endless cycles of boom and bust, it requires infinite economic growth just to pay off the compounding interest. And mathematically, that forces wealth to concentrate at the very top.
And the argument they make is that financial intermediaries are often just extracting value rather than actually creating anything tangible. So their proposed escape hatch is to completely flip the script on where value originates.
Right, back to the physical earth.
Exactly. The foundational premise of this white paper is that all real economic value originates exclusively from the earth. We're talking agriculture, mining, forestry, fisheries, and energy extraction.
The primary sector.
Yeah. The author's line in the sand is that if it doesn't come out of the ground, grow from the soil, or get pulled from the water, it's not actually new value.
That is the core philosophy. The argument dictates that everything else in our economy, manufacturing, retail, the entire service industry is simply transforming or distributing those base natural resources.
It makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah, take a smartphone, for instance. It is just highly organized minerals and petroleum. A five-star meal at a restaurant. That's just creatively transformed agricultural products. The chef didn't create new mass. They just rearranged what the farmer pulled from the soil.
It's like building a house. Think about the entire process. The bank provides the mortgage, right? They provide the debt, but the bank didn't actually swing a hammer or pour the concrete.
No, of course not.
The actual tangible wealth of that house was created by the lumberjack cutting the timber, the miner pulling the copper out of the mountain for the electrical wires, and the tradespeople physically putting those elements together.
The bank is essentially just keeping score on a ledger.
Yes, and charging you 30 years of interest for the privilege of using their scoreboard.
What's fascinating here is how the Second Value Protocol attempts to rewrite the rules of that scoreboard entirely.
Right.
The protocol proposes that new money should only enter the local economy when new physical value is demonstrably created from the earth. No loans, no central bank printing presses artificially inflating the supply.
Just real physical assets.
Exactly. Money is only born when verified. Physical commodities are extracted and cross the threshold into the supply chain.
But okay, if we are firing the bank and turning off the central printing press, how does that actually play out in a daily transaction?
Yeah.
Like if money is only born when a farmer harvests a field of wheat or a miner strikes a vein of copper, how does that translate into a functioning economy?
The white paper introduces a concept to solve this, which they call the dual nature of value. They split it into first value and second value.
Okay, let's break that down.
Let's use the exact agricultural example provided in the sources to ground this in reality. Imagine a food processor buys a single cow from a local farmer. The agreed-upon market price for this cow is, say, zero point zero 0.05 Bitcoin.
Okay, simple enough.
The farmer hands over the cow. The processor sends the zero point zero 0.05 Bitcoin from their wallet. That exchange is the first value. It's just a normal, everyday market transaction. The farmer is fully compensated for their labor and their product in a hard currency.
Right, but here's where it gets really interesting. Because the protocol recognizes that this cow entering the supply chain doesn't just benefit the farmer and the processor.
Not at all.
That cow represents a massive injection of caloric and economic energy into the town. People are going to eat that beef. It's going to sustain the local workforce, who will then go build things and invent things.
It enriches the whole community.
Exactly. So the blockchain sees that zero point zero 0.05 Bitcoin transaction, verifies that a physical cow changed hands, and simultaneously prints an equal amount of brand new local money.
The author calls these satoshis, or mimic Bitcoin.
So the system just manifests new local currency because a cow was raised and sold. Just like that.
That is the exact mechanism. The protocol mints 0.05 Bitcoins worth of these satoshis as pure, debt-free community credit.
Wow.
And this completely replaces the function of the commercial bank. Instead of a loan officer typing numbers into a computer to issue a debt-based line of credit, the physical transaction of the cow itself triggers the creation of the new tokens.
So it anchors the currency to reality.
Exactly. It anchors the expansion of the currency directly to real, observable market activity rather than speculation.
It's tying a digital ledger directly to biological physical reality. A parallel currency that only expands when the town's actual physical wealth expands.
Precise.
But wait, if the blockchain just minted a bunch of new satoshis because a cow was sold, who actually gets the bag? I mean, that money has to go somewhere. It doesn't just sit in a digital vault collecting dust.
Right, and the distribution model is arguably the most radical part of the entire protocol because it actively tries to solve the historical inequality of resource extraction.
The mining oligarch problem.
Yes. Think about historical resource economies.
Huh.
A gold rush town or a petroleum region. The wealth almost always concentrates heavily with the people who own the extraction equipment or the land.
Right, the guy with the biggest mining drill becomes a feudal lord.
Exactly. So to prevent that, the protocol completely decentralizes the newly minted tokens.
The sources break down the exact percentage split, and, we shouldn't just rattle off the numbers because the why behind them is wild.
It really is.
When the new money is minted, they slice the pie. A tiny fraction, 3%, goes back to the producer.
Just a little bonus on top of the Bitcoin they already received.
Right, to incentivize them to use the network. Then, the people maintaining the computer nodes and the verification sensors get a small cut to pay for their server costs and security. That makes sense.
About 2.6% to the validators and 0.3% to the oracles. The protocol also diverts about 14% into a commons governance fund.
Which is like a decentralized tax system.
Think of it exactly like that, but strictly for public goods. And it's controlled entirely by the community using a rigid one wallet, one vote system.
Completely independent of how much money is actually in your wallet.
Right, which prevents wealthy users from buying governance power.
But the lion's share, the part that really blew my mind reading through this is the remaining 80%.
Yeah, this is the big one.
The protocol takes 80% of every newly minted Satoshi and drops it directly into a community circulation pool. And then it distributes that pool equally to all registered community wallet holders every single week.
Every single week.
It functions exactly like a universal basic income, a UBI. But instead of the government taxing your income to pay for it, it's funded entirely by the local debt-free production of the earth.
It is essentially a protocol-level dividend. And economically, it's quite elegant because it ensures the new money flows through the economy from the bottom up rather than trickling down from a bank.
It's just wild.
By giving the newly minted credit directly to the consumers, it empowers market preference. Everyone gets a baseline share of the community's productivity just for living there.
Right. And if you want more than that baseline, you have to start a business, build something, or provide a service to capture that liquidity as people spend their weekly dividend.
Exactly.
Okay, I have to jump in here and push back hard because I know exactly what you, the listener, are thinking right now. I was thinking the exact same thing.
The inflation question.
Yes. If you are minting new money Every single time someone harvests a field of wheat or sells a cow or cuts down a tree, and you are just handing 80% of it out to everyone in town for free every week, doesn't that immediately trigger massive hyperinflation?
It's a very fair
I
concern.
mean, printing money and handing it out is the textbook recipe for a Weimar Republic situation where a loaf of bread costs a wheelbarrow full of cash.
It's the most logical objection to the entire concept, and the author of the white paper anticipates it aggressively. To address the inflation fear, we have to look at the macroeconomic math they rely on, specifically the quantity theory of money,
Okay.
which economists express as the equation MV equals PQ.
Break that alphabet soup down for us.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean for the guy just trying to buy groceries?
Let's simplify it. M is the total money supply and V is the velocity, like how fast people are spending that money.
Okay, got it.
On the other side of the equation, P is the price of goods, and Q is the quantity of real goods and services produced. The golden rule of this equation is straightforward. If the money supply grows faster than the real resources produced, you get inflation.
Right. Prices go up because you have more dollars chasing the same amount of stuff.
Exactly. But if the money supply grows at the exact same rate as the real physical resources being produced, prices stay perfectly stable.
Ah. Because the second value protocol only turns on the money printer when a new physical commodity is produced.
Precisely.
The money supply is mathematically locked to the growth of real resources. So if the community produces, say, 2% more wheat and beef this year, the money supply only grows by 2%.
Right.
You have more money, but you also have more food on the shelves, so the price of the food doesn't need to spike.
That is the stabilizing mechanism.
Yeah.
But it goes much deeper than that, and this brings in a concept from the text called the ecological S-curve, or logistic growth.
Okay, what's that?
Well, in our current debt-based system, the money supply has to grow exponentially forever, like a line shooting straight up on a graph. But because this protocol is tethered to the Earth, it mimics a biological ecosystem.
That makes sense because physical reality has limits. I mean, you can only grow so much wheat on a certain acreage of land. You can only safely harvest so many fish from the local lake before the population just collapses.
Precisely. The local economy eventually hits a carrying capacity based on the region's total ability to produce commodities. As the community approaches that maximum sustainable yield, the rate of new physical production slows down.
And because production slows down.
The creation of new money naturally slows down with it. The line on the graph curves and flattens out at the top. That's the S-curve.
Oh, I see.
Think of it like a video game leveling system. It's incredibly easy to level up and gain resources at level 1, but getting from level 99 to level 100 requires exponentially more effort. The system is literally designed to prevent infinite farming.
The sources also detail a few other natural stabilizers built into the system to prevent the money supply from bloating. One is a bit morbid, but mechanically it makes total sense. Dead wallets.
Yes, very practical.
When people pass away or they simply lose their private cryptographic keys, those tokens are permanently locked. They are naturally burned out of circulation, which acts as a deflationary counterbalance to population shifts.
They also introduce an optional yet highly debated economic lever called demurrage.
Demurrage.
Yes, which was heavily inspired by the early 20th century economist Silvio Gesell.
Demurrage is a fascinating concept. It's basically a system where unused money slowly decays over time.
Right.
Imagine if the digital dollars in your wallet rusted like iron or rotted like an apple. If you just hoard the satoshis under your digital mattress, they lose a tiny percentage of their value every month.
It sounds punishing, but the logic is that it heavily encourages people to spend or invest their money rather than hoarding it.
Right, which keeps the velocity of money high and keeps the local economy humming.
If we synthesize all of these mechanisms, the lock between money creation and physical production, the biological carrying capacity, the S-curves, the lost wallets, the demurrage, we are looking at a monetary model that attempts to be entirely self-correcting.
So what does this all mean? It means this isn't a debt economy where money is printed based on future promises to pay a bank back.
Oh, wow.
And it's not a fixed supply economy like pure Bitcoin, where there is a hard, unchangeable cap no matter how many people actually need to use the currency.
It behaves like a living biological organism.
Exactly. The money acts like nutrients flowing to where the productivity is, and it literally stops flowing if the productivity stops.
A biological organism is a great way to look at it. But for any biological economy to survive in the wild, it has to have an immune system to protect itself from parasites.
Oh, for sure.
And in a blockchain system tied to physical assets, the most dangerous parasite is fraudulent data.
Right. Because if human nature tells us anything, it's that if people know a blockchain prints free UBI money every time a cow is sold, someone is going to invent a ghost cow.
A ghost cow, exactly.
What's stopping me from sitting in my apartment telling the network, hey, I just harvested 10,000 cows on my balcony, and then sitting back while the blockchain prints me a fortune in Satoshis?
Nothing, unless the system checks.
Right. How does a piece of decentralized software actually verify that a physical, breathing cow exists out in the dirt?
In the world of crypto economics, this is notoriously known as the Oracle problem. It is by far the hardest technical challenge of the entire protocol.
So how do they fix it?
To solve it, the sources outline a dense, four-layer commodity verification system. It's a rigid architecture of trust designed to make faking production so incredibly difficult and so financially disastrous if you get caught that it's simply not worth attempting.
Okay, let's look at how they build that immune system. It starts with producer registration.
Right.
You can't just spin up an anonymous crypto wallet and claim to be a rancher. You have to register your actual physical farm with GPS coordinates and prove your historical capacity.
Exactly. If the system knows you only own a quarter-acre plot, the algorithm mathematically rejects your claim that you just harvested 10,000 tons of wheat.
Makes sense. Then what?
Once you are registered, the network requires physical proof from the real world. These are the oracles. We aren't just taking the farmer's word for it. We're talking about immutable data feeds from certified weigh scales, Internet of Things sensors attached to the harvesting equipment.
Wow, so actual hardware.
Yes, warehouse intake receipts, and potentially even cryptographically secured satellite imagery proving the crop canopy was actually there.
And it takes two to tango. You can't just say you produce something. A registered independent buyer has to cryptographically sign a receipt saying, yes, I physically received this delivery, I weighed it, and I paid hard Bitcoin for it.
The final layer of defense is validator verification. Independent computer nodes across the network review all of this data, the GPS, the sensor logs, the receipts, and check it against regional yield averages and historical weather patterns before they approve the transaction.
That is thorough.
And here is where the real teeth of the security model come in. Validators are required to stake a massive amount of their own capital. The text uses an example of 50,000 RCC tokens, just to be allowed to verify transactions.
Meaning they have serious skin in the game. So what happens if a validator decides to take a bribe from me and approves my fake balcony ghost cow harvest?
They are violently slashed by the protocol.
Slash!
Yes. The network automatically and irreversibly confiscates their entire 50,000 token stake, destroying their capital. And the fraudulent producer is permanently banned from the network.
Oh, wow. So the economic penalty for lying is mathematically designed to be far greater than the potential reward of the bribe.
Exactly. It's a robust, aggressive architecture.
But reading through the sheer complexity of the Oracle problem and the UBI distribution, you quickly realize this isn't the kind of thing you can just launch globally overnight and hope it magically replaces the US dollar.
Oh, absolutely not.
And to the author's credit, they know that. The launch strategy outlined in the white paper is incredibly specific. They don't want a global rollout. They want a petri dish.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, attempting immediate global scale would be disastrous. The protocol is meticulously designed to launch with zero pre-mined currency in a small, closed-loop pilot community of roughly 5,000 to 50,000 people.
The sources are actually very specific about the ideal locations for these Petri dish experiments. They suggest Canadian prairie agricultural towns,
Right.
specifically noting the region around Winnipeg, which has a massive century-old history of farming cooperatives. They also suggest isolated island economies or singular resource extraction towns.
Places with defined borders, economically speaking.
Yeah, the key requirement for the Petri dish is a short, highly visible supply chain. You need to be able to clearly see the farmer selling to the local processor right there in the community without a convoluted international shipping route.
The isolation is vital because the entire point of the pilot is simply to prove the concept in a controlled environment. They need to prove that real physical commodities can effectively mint digital money without inflation. They need to prove that the Oracle verification system can successfully defend against the ghost cow frauds.
And the UBI.
Most importantly, yes. They need to prove that the weekly 80% UBI distribution can actually sustain a local circular economy without anyone needing to walk into a bank and take out a loan.
It's about proving that the microbe can survive in the petri dish before you try to colonize the whole laboratory.
Exactly that. And once a pilot community successfully stabilizes its own local production-backed economy, then other communities can observe that success and adopt the open source protocol for themselves.
It spreads organically.
Eventually, decades down the line, these independent, hyper-local economies could create digital bridges to trade with one another, slowly forming a federated global network of value that completely bypasses the traditional financial system.
It is a massive paradigm shift. We've spent this deep dive exploring a complete ground-up reimagining of finance.
Really is.
We're looking at a monetary system where the money in your pocket represents completed economic work derived directly from the earth, rather than a future debt owed to a commercial bank.
It forces us to ask very fundamental, almost philosophical questions about our economic reality. Like, is money simply a tool for tracking human obligations? Or should it be a direct mathematical reflection of our interaction with the natural world?
And whether you are a hardcore crypto enthusiast looking for the next evolution of decentralized tech, or someone studying traditional finance trying to understand how we escape the boom and bust cycle, this thought experiment forces you to look in the mirror and ask, what actually is money?
And who should it truly serve?
Right. Should it serve the institutions that issue the debt or the community that physically extracts the value?
It challenges the very foundation of how we value human labor, community enrichment, and natural resources.
Which leaves us with one final question for you to mull over. It's something that jumped out at me while reading through the ecological limits of this entire system. Yeah, we spent a lot of time discussing how the money supply is strictly mathematically tied to extracting physical resources from the earth.
Right, the S-curve.
Exactly. The more wheat you harvest, the more fish you catch, the more money your community has. But what happens when that local ecosystem is depleted?
That's a great question.
If a community gets greedy and overfarms its land to dust or overfishes its lake until it's empty, their physical production crashes. And because new money is only born from new production, their monetary supply would instantly stagnate.
It would stop entirely.
So, does a production-backed currency mathematically force a society to adopt extreme environmental conservation, simply because destroying their local ecology would literally bankrupt their entire monetary system?
It's an incredible incentive structure to think about.
It makes you look at a dollar bill and an apple in a completely different way. Something to chew on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the second value protocol. Keep questioning the systems around you, and we'll see you next time.